Good evening, everyone, and welcome. We're going to get started. My name is Paul O'Neill, and on behalf of Kingston's Buried Treasures, I'd like to welcome everybody here to this month's presentation in our monthly lecture series, the subject being Arthur Wicks, the cleaner who controlled the Senate. And I have a very special surprise for everybody this month.
He's here.
He is here. He is here. But tonight, our featured presenter is actually going to talk about the subject of our lecture. Believe it or not, we're actually going to hear about Arthur Wicks. And Arthur Wicks is really one of the more interesting characters in Kingston's recent past. He began his career owning a steam cleaning business here in Kingston and became involved in politics, eventually rising to the position of Lieutenant Governor of New York State. But during his political career, which spanned almost 30 years, for a large portion of that career, he effectively controlled the New York State Senate. And the contributions that he made to this area, we still feel today. So he really was an interesting character, and I know we're all very excited to hear about him. And our featured presenter tonight is none other than our own Hugh Reynolds. I'm sure everybody knows Hugh. Hugh's been a noted journalist here in Kingston and Ulster County for many, many years. And he's been writing about our local, state, and national political scene for most of his career. And he really has been an integral part of this lecture series. And he really has been one of the main reasons that this series has done so well. So it's a great honor and a great privilege to welcome our featured presenter tonight, Hugh Reynolds.
Thank you, Paul. You delivered that almost the way I wrote it. I'd like to begin by thanking some people and organizations that helped me put this together. This was quite a lot of this was a voyage of discovery for me too, as sometimes happens with these lectures. You think you know a lot about a particular subject. In fact, I suggested to Paul that Arthur Wicks would be a good subject, and Paul said, "Who?" And so he's a little young to remember, as some of you out there probably knew Arthur Wicks. I'd like to thank the Kingston Daily Freeman for loaning me the Wicks file, from which we got from the newspaper clips, which I was able to get some information. Former Mayor Jim Satile, who saved this 100th anniversary edition of the Daily Freeman, which is 1971, and within this edition is a very long interview that I did with Arthur Wicks at his home in Glen Erie in the summer of 1971, and it was the only time in my career I've used a tape recorder, because it was Arthur Wicks, and I wanted to make sure I got the quotes right. And he was quite a vigorous man. He was 83 then, and he lived to be 95, almost 96. And so thanks to the Mayor Satile, who, whenever I need a reference to the 71 edition, I go to him. Joe Tantillo, of course, for these graphics. That picture is taken from the front page of the New York Times when Wicks resigned I'll get to that, when Wicks resigned as majority leader of the New York State Senate. In modern times, it's very similar to Shelley Silver resigning as the Speaker of the Assembly. It was that, and is that important a position. And I have something for Ed Ford, because if you mention Ed Ford in any of these addresses, the audience is immediately on your side. Phyllis McCabe, you won't be able to see it up there, but it's quite an interesting picture. There was a program last week. It was a Cornell Street Studios had these characters dress up as Kirkendall and Julia Dillon and some of the people that have been featured in this series, historic figures from Kingston, dress up in period pieces and just kind of do a skit or a play about speaking in the first person, which is kind of interesting. And sitting in the middle of them at the end of the program is our man, Ed Ford, who fits right in. So Ed, when I'm done, you can take that. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you. And I think that's. Oh, and there's one other thing. I'll say this till the end. Remind me, Paul, that I have something at the end. Now, I got a haircut for the occasion, and my barber, Ralph, was sitting here. I thought he asked a very pertinent question. You know, with all the research and the dates and the times and the newspaper clips and on the web, digging out sometimes arcane facts, like the Wicks law was actually named after was first named for another name, an assemblyman named Wicks, which I didn't know until I started digging this up. And I was, even as late as this afternoon, getting my haircut, I really hadn't finalized how I was going to present all this stuff. And Ralph helped me. He knew of Wicks, being a native and from Pankaki. But he said, "What's so important about Arthur Wicks?" Which is why I'm here. So that really helped. That really helped focus me. Anyway, Arthur Wicks is generally given credit for having the thruway routed on the west side of the river, as Paul pointed out. This is an accomplishment that really can't be minimized. If you think of transportation in the Hudson Valley, of course you had the Hudson River, which was vital to the early development, colonial times. Then you had the canals, the D&H and the Erie Canal, and we've had lectures on the D&H. Then you had the railroads, and then you had the New York State Thruway. And it's kind of hard to imagine what Ulster County would be like if the Thruway were on the other side of the river. And I've done some research on that, and some of that interview I did with Wicks 40 years ago, he spoke in some detail about how that occurred. In any case, his, I think, is a uniquely American story. I hate to use the word Horatio, the expression Horatio Alger. For one thing, anybody under the age of 50 doesn't know who he was, but it wasn't exactly rags to riches, but he came from very humble background. Arthur Herman Wicks was born on December 24th, 1887. In New York City, yeah, and he complained about having a birthday on Christmas Eve. He said he very often got birthday gifts under the Christmas tree, and he felt as a child that he was shorted a lot of times. And in New York City, he attended city schools until the 6th grade. Now today we'd be appalled at that, but a 6th grade education he's 12, and at the turn of the century, was quite comprehensive and fundamental. A person could read and write and knew a lot of basic stuff. And a lot of people in the 20th century anyway, which is a long time ago, in the early 20th century were quite successful with only 6th or 8th grade education. He never went any further than that, although he studied correspondence courses to advance himself. The family came. I have a little bit of a cold, which you'll probably hear, but being a trooper, I came out. The family moved to the town of Olive in 1902, when Arthur was 13 or 14 years old, because his father, his brother, and his sister all had tuberculosis. And in those days, as some of us can recall, my grandfather died from that. There was no cure for tuberculosis. The only treatment was to get fresh air, to go to the country. And the father, who was a butcher by trade in New York, bought a a farm in Olive, but he didn't live very long. He died shortly thereafter, along with a brother and a sister who were 18, I think, and 20 years old. So certainly Arthur Wicks knew family tragedy. The family moved back to New York, and where Arthur Wicks studied engineering by correspondence courses, and he wanted to be a surveyor. He had worked on some work crews, and he understood that if he was going to get ahead, he needed specialized education. In sometime around 1909, and some of the stuff is hard to trace without getting into census records and things like that, but sometime around 1909, he met and married Mabel Everett of a town called Olive City, which is now under the Ashokan, in June at the Ashokan Reformed Church, which is still up there on Winchell's Corners. They were married there, and they were married his whole life. She survived him by a few years. They apparently settled in that area. There's records of him being involved in politics up there, but as a Democrat. At that time, 100 years ago, Olive was a Democratic town, stronghold. Now it is again. For a while, it went, particularly under Wicks, it went Republican. And he comes to Kingston in 1916, where he purchases the Thompson Laundry downtown that had been started by a man named Thompson, who might have been related to Jim Thompson or to Mayor Thompson. And get this is interesting, and this is repeated several times in his newspaper clips and biographies, for $8,500 in borrowed funds. $8,500 in today's dollars is $200,000, and I find that kind of interesting. I wasn't really able to get too far into this, but for a 28-year-old man to come to Kingston, and from out of town for that matter, to come to Kingston and borrow $200,000 to buy a business, I think was unusual. He made quite a go of the business. He turned out to be a very good businessman. In 1917, he became an active Democrat in Kingston, and he was a ward committeeman for the Democrats, and he was a member of the executive committee of the county. In 1917, he had a break with the Democratic Party. It's kind of like a lot of things about his history, and I don't mean this in a bad way. It's kind of vague. Things happen. Nobody's quite sure, and most of the people are dead anyway. But he breaks with the Democratic Party. One of the stories, which is unconfirmed, was that he wanted the war had broken out in April 1917, and at Wicks, who would have been 29 then, 28 actually. He would have been 29 on Christmas Eve. He would have been 30 on Christmas Eve. Excuse me. He sought a commission in the Army. He wanted to fight in the war, and he didn't get it. And he felt he deserved it. He had worked for the party and done a lot of things, and so he became disenchanted, as it were, and apparently was not involved in politics for about 5 years. And then he joined the Republican Party at the behest of, some of you may remember this name, of Philip Elting, who was the Republican chairman that had been since 1904. And he liked Wicks. He'd seen Wicks operate as a ward committeeman. He was very diligent, hard worker, real grassroots type of committeeman, which he was his whole life. And in 1926, about this time, Wicks becomes very deeply involved in his new home in Kingston. He joins the Rotary Club. He's a Mason because he's a businessman. He runs his laundry. It's expanding. He and his wife and maybe one or two other people worked the laundry when he first bought it, and eventually they had 100 employees, and it became quite an operation. So he was a talented guy, and one day, Phil Elting called him in to his office, and he introduced him to a man, to the incumbent state senator, and Arthur Boughton from Delaware County, as Wicks tells the story, or told me the story. And he said, Phil Elting said to Boughton, "I want you to meet your successor." And Boughton just nodded, shook hands with Wicks, and left. And that's how Wicks became the senator. And he protested. He didn't know anything about state politics or anything like that. He was a local guy, and Elting assured him that he would learn on the job, which he did. And Elting also told him the salary was $1,500 in those days, which was not a bad salary. You're talking 1926. Elting instructed him that $1,000 of his salary would go to the Republican committee in the town of his opponent, whether Delaware or the county, Delaware or Sullivan. There was three counties in the district, and that $500 of it would be donated to the Ulster County Republican Committee. So essentially, he was working for nothing. And Arthur accepted it on those terms. There may have been some perks that we don't know about. He goes through. He works his way up the ladder, as it were, in the Senate. He's easily reelected. One of the first we note Wicks on the record is that he co-sponsors legislation to construct the Rip Van Winkle Bridge at Catskill. It appears that Wicks was always a bricks and mortar kind of guy. The pharaohs built pyramids to their memory. Modern politicians build bridges and highways and other edifices. I have a note here that 1936, high school student Ed Ford takes a part-time job at the Kingston laundry. That's actually a non sequitur because it has nothing to do with Wicks. But if you throw Ed Ford in, you're going to be all right. Now, Wicks's career starts to pick up steam in the 40s. In 1941, he is named. There was a death in the Senate. He's named chairman of the Senate Finance Committee. He told me, he said, "You can't believe what it's like to be chairman of the Senate Finance Committee." He said, "These guys would kiss your butt," and he said, "butt," in a window at Macy's for a favor. It was a very influential. It's Finance Committee. Everything goes through finance, as did the Thruway, which we'll get to in a moment. Wicks's dispute about the Thruway was not with Dewey, as research showed, and I was a little surprised by that. Dewey was his arch enemy, and Dewey brought him down. And sometimes when you try to connect dots in history, what appears to be a connection is really not. It was Governor Lehman who left office in mid-December of 1942. Thomas Dewey had been elected governor that year, the first of his 3 terms, and he was coming into office. Lehman was a Democrat. Dewey, of course, was a Republican. And prior to that, sometime that fall, Wicks said that he and Lehman called him to his office and wanted to know why the Thruway financing was not moving through the Senate Finance Committee. And Wicks told him, rather bluntly, it's not going anywhere unless it goes down the west side of the Hudson River. And Lehman, this is according to Wicks again, this 71 interview. Lehman obviously, was taken aback by that, and he said, "Artie, it doesn't make any sense on the east side, or on the west side. The topography is much more difficult. We'd have to build a new bridge, which we're rebuilding, the Tappan Zee Bridge, to get over to New York. New York's on the other side. And it would cost an enormous amount of, much more money." And Wicks said, "Be that as it may," he used the expression, "the west side has been the bastard side of the Hudson for too long, and that in that road is going down the west side. And so Lehman got his back up a little bit, and he said, well, Artie, let's see, who the hell is running this government? And so you have the governor and the Senate finance chairman. And Wicks said, he said to the governor, well, why don't we find out? So a few months later, Lehman was wrapping up, and Lehman wanted the thruway to be on his record. As politicians get to the end of their terms, they tend to look at their legacies, and he wanted that on his record. So he called Arthur Wicks up, and he said, all right, can you get that legislation together? He says, it's all ready, Governor. Just send it up to me. And he did. And so it went down the west side. So hooray for Arthur. Let me see. It was called, incidentally, the Cross-State Superhighway, 380 some miles originally as planned. Lehman also made the argument that Wicks made the argument that the East Side already had a superhighway. It had the Taconic Parkway, which had been built in the 1920s. So, 1944, the A.H. Wicks Fire Company is named in his honor. The first 4 bills that Wicks put in as a senator had to do with volunteer firemen. In 1944, Governor Dewey authorized the Department of Public Works to proceed with construction plans for this thruway. But things were pretty much held up during the war. They weren't building anything. They were building tanks, not highways. At about the same time, and it appears here where the conflicts between Dewey and Wicks began, at least for the record. In 1944, Wicks advanced plans for a $50,000 study for a bridge at Kingston. In 1946, in 1944, get back to politics, back to 44, Wicks becomes the county Republican chairman, succeeding Roscoe Ellsworth. Some of us knew Roscoe. He was a judge. Roscoe Ellsworth, who ran for Supreme Court judge. In that year, Wicks backed Dewey for president against Roosevelt. He would have backed almost anybody for president against Roosevelt, whom he detested. And in 1946, Dewey vetoes the Kingston Bridge as unnecessary, and so it goes back in the hopper. Same year, Wicks co-sponsored legislation that, which is now called the Wicks Law, that requires separate bids on municipal contracts. In other words, in the private sector, if you hire somebody to build a large building, you hire a general contractor. That contractor hires the plumbers, the masons, the electricians, and so forth. Under the Wicks Law, they're all separately bid. The net effect, according to many studies, is a 20 or 30% increase in cost for municipal construction. And Wicks was an unusual Republican for his day, and he was a pro-labor guy. You think of Roosevelt in that era or Democrats in general as pro-labor, but Wicks had very close ties to the labor movement. In 1948. Dewey relented and agreed to construction of the Kingston Bridge, which was dedicated in May of 1957, about 6 months after Wicks left office. Wicks's comment at the time was that the new bridge, quote unquote, will open up a vast territory, and it certainly did. I mean, look at the town of Ulster without the Kingston Bridge is also kind of the way it is now. It's hard to imagine. In 1950, Wicks and Dewey clash over political appointments. Dewey's comment, for the record, was, "You and your goddamn Senate." So it was getting testy with these guys. In 1952, he sold his laundry, Thompson Laundry, to the Kalish family. Wicks was 64 at that point, and you begin to wonder whether he was thinking about retirement. In those days, 65 was pretty much the end of the line for most people. I'm gonna go off chronology here to just talk about a couple of things. Let me see if I can get this up. Whoop. The other way. Okay. Do you reckon do you folks who are Kingstonians, or at least do you recognize that building? That's 41 Pearl Street, and by Democrats and Republicans alike, it was Wicks's. Senator Wicks had his office on the ground floor there, and it was known as the Kremlin, because, and this is in the 40s and the 50s, because a lot of secret stuff went on there, and I'll just tell a quick story, not to put myself in it, but when I came to town, my wife and I were looking for an apartment, and she was looking at the Freeman One ads, and she said, "Gee, I think I found a really nice apartment. It's on the 3rd floor, this brick building, and it's uptown. It's easy to walk to places and all that." I said, "Yeah, well, where is it?" She said, "It's on a corner of Fair and Pearl Street." So I hadn't been in town very long, but I knew the geography enough, and I'm thinking, gee, there's a church on one corner, a church on another corner, there's an architect's office, and then there's, I said, oh my gosh, I said, that's the Kremlin. I said, we can't have our address as 41 Pearl Street. So we didn't move there. Physically, Wicks was not a big guy. I'd give him 5'7". He was about 130 pounds, around there. He's wiry, very natty dresser, natty in a more positive sense. He was a well-dressed man, as they say. He liked to dance, liked to sing, liked to play golf. He was a member of Twaffskill, and when he got older and he couldn't walk the hills over there, he joined Woodstock. He's not in my presence, but his language was described as salty and brusque. I interviewed him for maybe 2 hours. I always add 10 minutes to it, but several hours I interviewed him, and I don't think he swore once. It was kind of interesting watching him walk around uptown, though. He had the walk of a man of determination who had someplace to go and something to do, even in his retirement years. He ran the Republican committee. He was the boss. It was a top-down operation, and that's how he got into politics, with his previous boss telling him that he'd be the next senator. Well, the way it worked in the old Republican Party is Arthur Wicks told you when you'd run for office, or when you wouldn't. He'd tell you when it was time. And you worked in the hustings for maybe many years, and he watched very carefully every single district. When those returns came in, he would look at those returns, and if you were, say, an elected official, and your return was down in your home, he particularly looked at home districts. He had the belief that if you were popular among your neighbors, then you were doing a good job, and if your vote total slipped, you'd be on the carpet. He lived in various places around Kingston. I think Jack Finch just said he sold Wicks's house at 225 Albany Avenue. He lived there for a while. He lived on St. James Street in a house that was later occupied by Jack St. John. He lived in the Governor Clinton Hotel. And one of his early endeavors was he was involved in the construction and the financing and the management of the Governor Clinton Hotel. It's kind of a unique operation in that it was, they raised the money through selling stock in the hotel. And Arthur was a big stockholder. And in the 30s, when things got a little tough in business, they call it the Real Depression, the mortgage was held by an insurance company. Arthur told me the story. It was held by an insurance company, and the hotel was late on its payments. We're just having cash flow issues. And the insurance company was about to call in the mortgage. And Wicks said he contacted the president of the insurance company as the Senator Wicks, and he asked him whether he would like the New York State Senate to conduct an investigation of the New York State insurance industry. And very shortly after that, there were more generous terms that were offered. You know, he was not above using using his own using influence. No, let me see if I can go this way. This way? Other way. Okay, these are a couple of pictures of Wicks taken in midlife. The next one is an interesting picture, I think. This is the ribbon cutting in Catskill, I believe. One of the first sections that was built of the thruway was the Catskill-Kingston connection. And believe it or not, for a while, it was free. Yeah. You could ride back and forth. And I think people just would go out on a Sunday afternoon and ride on this beautiful four-lane road. So here you have Dewey, Arthur's archenemy. Yeah, here it is. If you can read the sign, it says Saugerties Catskill, 1950, with Arthur standing next to him. And next to that is one of the first cars to go through. Remember, you used to throw coins into a basket, and if you missed, you had to get out of the car. So they improved that. This is the thruway as a brand new road. This is the toll booth, I guess, at Kingston. It's pretty busy right away.
Lots of Chevrolets.
A lot of Chevys. Yeah, we sold American cars in those days, and we drove them. This is for a man who had really no formal education for his whole life. Arthur Wicks was deeply involved in education. He was on the board of directors at Bard College. He sent 16 boys. Sorry, ladies, but in those days, he sent 16 boys to college on his own expense. And he refused to ever identify publicly any of those families. He felt it would be politics to play politics. Bud Colleton, who some of you old-time Democrats may remember, called Wicks the greatest recruiter he'd ever seen. Wicks went out and recruited people from outside what traditional Republican circles, which would be Twaskill Golf Club and places like that, the country club Republicans. He recruited what they used to call ethnic people, Italian people, Irish people, into the Republican Party. People like Al Spada, for instance. There weren't a lot of Italians, people of Italian nationality in the Republican Party when Arthur Wicks became chairman. He made it his business to expand the party. It was very inclusive by design. And then, of course, it went the other way. The height of I asked Wicks. I was a little nervous asking him this question, but I said to him, and this goes to his downfall. I asked Wicks during the interview in 1971. I said, Senator, the record indicates that you never made more than $23,500 a year as a senator. And yet, you lived under Governor Clinton. You had a home in Florida, I think Boca Raton. Drove big cars, vacationed in Europe, sent a dozen boys through college. And he said to me, well, Hugh, when you're the majority leader or the finance chairman of the New York State Senate, you meet a lot of influential men. And you can do things for them. You can help them out. And he said, and he was cleaning it up for me. I was 29 at the time. And although I questioned him pretty carefully about what we're going to talk about in a minute, but, and he said, after the war, he said, Eastman Kodak, is it Rochester? Yeah. he said Eastman Kodak had plans to really build what it did in Rochester, and he said they needed modern roads and upgraded facilities and things like that in order, like anybody would coming to Ulster County now, in order to carry out those plans. And they were pretty much pigeonholed in the bureaucracy of the DOT or whatever it was in those days, Department of Public Works in those days, and they just couldn't they couldn't start without this approval. And so Wicks, as the finance chairman, made a few phone calls or sent a few letters or whatever he did, and boom, the gates opened up, and things got done. And he said, and those men tend to be grateful. And he said they gave me stock advice. He said. I doubt if he bought any of that stock, but he bought a lot of Eastman Kodak stock, and he bought a lot of IBM stock, and he had quite a portfolio. So these are the influential men, but there were other influential men that got Arthur Wicks in trouble. This is I just threw this in for your benefit. Every 3 or 4 years or so, it seems, there's a movement by government usually to repeal Wicks, but it's pro-union legislation, and the unions they have their constituency, and the unions feel it creates work for their men and jobs. For their members, and they're stronger than the opposition. So this is repeal Wicks. It's a waste. And, well, so what? It's a cost of doing business. And anyway, in 1953, this is an interesting year because 1953 is the last year of Dewey's term. He does not run for re-election in 1954. Wicks becomes lieutenant governor. I don't have the name here, but not that it matters a lot. But there was a vacancy, and by statute, the majority leader moves up to acting lieutenant governor. In fact, Wicks sat in his chair that said Lieutenant Governor, State of New York, when I did the interview. It was really cool. It was a beautiful red leather seat with the seal of New York on it with Lieutenant Governor. And so he was literally a heartbeat away from being governor of New York, if anything had happened to Dewey. Dewey discovered that Wicks had paid several visits to Sing Sing prison to a convicted extortionist, labor union boss, and a racketeer named Joseph Fay. Fay had been head of the operating engineers union. He was sent up in 1945 for 18 years on extortion charges. Fay was described in published reports as, quote, barrel-chested ex-bartender from Troy. Okay, tough guy. Wicks explained, if you want to call it that, Wicks's response was that there were some labor issues on the thruway which was being built, and that he went to Sing Sing to visit Fay in order to try to get Fay from Sing Sing, I might add, to straighten out. As Wicks said, he said people were walking around with iron clubs in their hand, and it could have gotten violent. I think he might have exaggerated a little bit. Dewey called for his ouster, and more than that, Dewey called for a special session which the governor has the authority of the state senate to remove Arthur Wicks from office. And now this is kind of an interesting period. This is one of the most powerful men in the legislature, and the governor, even Cuomo didn't call for Silver's removal from office. You know, get out of town. I don't know if he even called for his stepping down as speaker, but they went into a special session in secret. Special session. There was actually two things on the agenda: getting rid of Arthur Wicks and reapportionment. neither one happened. Wicks came out, and that picture was taken. That picture was on the front page of the New York Times, and where Wicks announced that he had agreed to step down as majority leader, but that he would not resign as senator. And he said that his conference, the Republican conference, supported him. He called that vindication. I think Dewey and Wicks both declared victory and walked away because Dewey didn't push it. I think part of the deal was Wicks would run one more time and leave, and he did. He ran in 1954 and took 60% of the vote and then retired at the end of that term. In 56, one of the last things he did, this is the education senator, was to sponsor a $250 million bond issue to upgrade SUNY New York. There's a lot of people who are the beneficiaries of that expansion. There was another big expansion under Rockefeller, but yeah, Wicks got that through. An estimated 1,000 people attended his retirement dinner in Monticello. I guess you couldn't find a place to sit 1,000 people in Ulster County in those days. He established the Wicks Foundation for Scholarships, which is administered now by Ulster County Community College. Here's a trivia question. Who succeeded Arthur Wicks as Republican chairman? Assemblyman Ken Wilson. And then this is curious in his life. Now he's out of office for a few years now. He's a private citizen. The business with Joey Fay and all that is apparently history. A state investigation commission under an Arthur Reuter comes to Kingston and investigates Arthur Wicks, who's out of office for 3 years now, in 1958, on charges of bribery. They accused Arthur Wicks and his cohorts in the Kremlin of setting up a road paving company, and the towns under their control would have to buy blacktop and other supplies from Arthur's. He of course denied it, and even Governor Harriman, who was a Democrat, it was in the papers, expressed surprise at the charges, and it was pretty interesting stuff. They had Connie Heiselman was his secretary, and he was accused of things. And it sounded pretty serious, but then it just kind of went away. And I think a guy named Morgan Ryan was the one guy who did some misdemeanor, and then that was the end of that. That same year, but not that same commission, investigated harness racing in New York State, and those reports were on file in Wicks's file. Again, Wicks had been out of office for a while. But the harness racing scandal was pretty amazing stuff. People would, mostly high-ranking politicians, all these birds of a feather. There was a lot of smoke around Arthur on this one. It would appear that Arthur knew something about horse racing. I'll tell you this story. When Monticello Racetrack opened up in 1958, in the summer of 1958, Arthur got some Trailways buses. He was somehow involved in that too. Got some buses together and invited Republican committeemen and their wives to go down to the grand opening. And it was almost a formal affair, and women dressed up with the jewels and the whole thing. The men dressed up, and it was dinner and in 10 races. And there was a committeeman named Dave, who I knew, and Dave didn't know anything about horses, but he was a committeeman, and he went on a ride. And after the first race, he said the senator came up to him and he said, "Dave, how'd you do?" And Dave said, "Senator, I don't know anything about horses. I lost." And so Arthur said, according to Dave, Arthur said to him, "Dave, meet me here." He said, "Bet the 2 horse in the next race to win, and then meet me here at the end of every race, and I'll give you a horse." And Dave, who knew nothing about horses, said, "Oh, yeah, okay." And sure enough, he wins the next 9 races. and they're riding back on the bus, and Arthur's going up and down the aisle. He was a pretty gregarious type of man. And excuse me. And he comes to Dave's seat, Dave and his wife, His wife is still alive. And so he said, so Dave, how'd you do? Geez, Arthur, thank you, Senator. I won like 9. I won all the races. Well, how much did you make, Dave? And Dave said, $120. And Wicks said, you won 9 races in a row, and you only won $120? How much did you bet? He said, $2. So Arthur knew something about racing. Oh, I mean, yeah. And then there was it was a fairly quiet retirement for Wicks. The Republican Party kind of broke into different factions in those days. Once he was gone, Ken Wilson didn't pay a lot of attention, wasn't really interested in the kind of grassroots organization that Wicks, right until he left, was involved with. There was the interview in 1971, which I mentioned far too frequently. He established the Arthur Wicks Scholarship at Ulster County in 1980. In 1985, he died 8 weeks after his 95th birthday. Just last month would have been the 30th. February 15th would have been the 30th anniversary. About 150 people attended his funeral, including me, at the Fair Street Reformed Church, where he had been an elder. Jim Matthews gave the eulogy, which was quite moving, and it's on file. And in conclusion, one of the stories that Wicks told me was he had just taken office. He was a freshman senator, and by tradition, the governor, who was Al Smith at that time, and that's going back, this is January 1927, invites the legislators and guests to the mansion for a reception. It's a governor's reception. I don't know if they still do it, and so Wicks tells a story about he's standing by the fireplace, and he's talking to Jimmy Walker, who was the mayor of New York at the time. And Wicks said to Walker, you know, Jimmy, I don't know if I like this political business. Gee, I mean, there's some characters here, and it's really cutthroat. And he said, I don't know if I want to get into this. And Jimmy Walker said to him, according to Wicks, Artie, it isn't the getting into politics you have to worry about, it's the getting out. And on that note, thank you all for your attentiveness. And if you have any questions, I'd be glad to field them.
You wanted me to remind you something at the end? Is that it?
Yeah. Oh, this last picture was taken shortly before this one here. Shortly before. Whoop.
That one. Nope, the other way.
The other way.
One more.
This picture was taken on the occasion of their. It must have been the 70th or something. It was taken in 1984, the year before he died. So it would have been their. It would have been their 75th anniversary of Arthur and Mabel Wicks. Lived a long, healthy life.
She looks like Mrs. Bush, doesn't she?
She could be.
Yeah.
She does look a little bit like that. Do we have any questions? Oh, hold on. And if you have a question, I'll come and bring the microphone to you. So I'll just ask that you wait until you get the microphone.
You did a hell of a good job, so much that I'd like to read that article in the 71 paper. Is it available? Or can you make it available?
I can put you in touch with the person who owns it. I really could. Satile, yeah, Jim. Give him a call. Yeah.
I thought you might have
It's kind of fragile too. It's fragile. It's 40 some years old.
Yeah.
Have any other questions?
Nobody?
I have a comment.
Sure.
When the thruway was started, they had this end. I worked in a quarry up in Saratoga Springs. They got the contract. I wasn't working at the time. I was in the Army at the time, but I'd worked there. And the thruway, whoever was bidding it, bid the quarry for the stone, for the concrete, from Schenectady to Amsterdam. And there's a lot of stone in that road.
Mm-hmm.
And the first day, the first truck showed up, Guy comes over to him. He says, I want to see your union card. He says, we're non-union. He says, take your stone back where you got it and tell them we don't want any more. Well, he did. And the next day, the union people showed up at the quarry, set up card tables, and everybody there got unionized. Not only that, their pay went up 3 times of what they were making. Now, the aftermath was, there was, in their dinner buckets were quarts of liquor.
Quarts of liquor?
Oh, man, I'll tell you,
Wow,
it was
that's a
tough
good
keeping
story. That's a good
It
story.
was tough keeping that place sober for a while there until these guys kind of settled into all this new money they were making. But it was a big blast.
Thank you.
And it was all the union pushing, and the Wicks law must have got the stone.
Some of it had to do with Wicks's association with unions, I believe. This is somewhat speculative, but one of the things that Wicks said when he was asked about dealing with this Joe Fay, mobster, Wicks said that during the 30s, before Joe Fay went to jail, that Joe Fay got several hundred union jobs for his people. You can imagine what it was like in Ulster County in the 30s. It must have been terrible. He got these jobs for his people, as Wicks called them, his people, good paying jobs at a time when nobody had work. And he said he never forgot that, and he was loyal to them. So as he presented it, it was more of a loyalty thing. And I think Rosendale Cement had something to do with the throughway, and that's another lecture of requiring a certain percentage of concrete to come out of those caves out there.
If people know about the Century House in Rosendale.
This is Joe Tantillo, by the way.
Yes, and this story has to do with why there was Rosendale Cement involved in the New York State Thruway. A.J. Snyder was someone who really could take advantage of any situation and come out on top. He was the longtime owner of many of the old quarries that produced the original. It was called natural cement, which lost out over time to Portland cement, because natural cement took a much longer time to dry, although it was much harder. And he refused to give up on creating a Portland cement out of Rosendale cement that would be a superior product. And there was a new road going in between New Paltz and I think it was Newburgh. It might have been Route 32, I don't know. But they were doing it in sections as they build highways, and he happened to be there when they were putting in different sections of the highway, and he called over and found out who the supervisor was, and said, "Would you consider having my Rosendale cement, Portland cement, used as one of the sections, and next year we'll come back and see how it wore against what you're putting in?" And the guy said, "Okay, that'd be fine." Came back a year later, and the Rosendale, sure enough, the Rosendale cement wore a lot better. And this came to the attention of the powers that be, and it was decided that there would be one part of Rosendale cement per 5 parts of Portland cement in all of the thruway. And he revived something that had been dead. His Portland cement, his Rosendale cement had been really dead to the market for 40 years. So he was a pretty remarkable businessman. And that's the story.
Thank you, Joe. And that's Joe Tantillo, who handles all of the design work and the graphics and everything. So thank you, Joe. Do we have any other questions? Hugh answered every possible question you could ever have about Arthur Wicks. Well, Hugh, excellent job. Hugh, thank you so much.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And now to further curry favor with the audience, Paul gives me far too much credit for advancing this series. Really, all I do is I show up for all 35, or God knows how many. How many is it? 32 now. Every one. I plan my life around the third Friday of the month, and I usually get a cookie and a little wine for it. But Paul's a young man with a real interest in the history and the culture of our community. These have been very interesting series. They're on, thanks to Bob, they're on tape, and there's a lot of good research. There are some exceptions, and I won't mention any recent speakers, but there's a lot of work that goes into these, and we have some very good locally grown historians that have participated in this, and we've all learned. I think I certainly have. We've all learned the little things. Another lecturer. We've all learned a lot about our community. And it's I didn't think it'd last more than 4 or 5. That's what I signed up for, and here it is 30 later. So anyway, what I'm giving, I don't hand these out very often, but this is a genuine Ulster County Gazette T-shirt, and the character, it looks a little big on Paul, but he'll fill out. You know? And this is the same logo, same image, and. This was drawn, I don't know, obviously quite a while ago, but we were into a good news phase. People were saying, how come it's just bad news in the papers all the time? And the answer is because it sells newspapers. It's pretty simple. So the frog here, I presume you get the message here. The frog, the princess is kissing the frog, and the frog is declaring good news. Because you know what happens after she kisses the frog. So, Paul.
Hugh, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Oh, one other thing, John Schultz. Thank you, John. You're good looking. You're just as handsome as ever. John gave me a 1981 edition of the Ulster County Gazette because I don't have any of them. And thanks, John. Thanks for the consideration.
Hugh, thank you so much, and thank you for the shirt. That was wonderful. And Hugh doesn't like it when I do this, and I do it every time because it is important. This series is really a community effort. This series would not be what it is without all of you. But we do have some MVPs that really push us along, and Hugh is absolutely one of those. As I say, Hugh was banging the drum of this series before there was a drum. And there were only a few people here the first time. We thought we might get 3, maybe 5. And again, we're here at 32. A lot of that, the responsibility for that is Hugh. Hugh started writing articles about this, about each presentation that we did, and most of you have probably heard about it from Hugh's articles. In fact, if you read the article about last month's talk on Sherman Hasbrook, I actually called up Hugh and I said, boy, that must have been some lecture. Where did you go? I wish I went there. I learned significant. He did say when he left, he said, you know what? I'm really going to earn my money on this one. And he did. So he really does. And we do, besides for the fact that he's done 2 presentations for us, he really has been one of the people that has made this a success. So Hugh, thank you very much. Thank you. And I got a shirt too. So we do get to the point of where we thank everybody. But one thing before we do, it really has so much bearing. Think of what Ulster County would have been if the Thruway was on the other side of the river. We would be Greene County. Yeah. We really would be. And we take for granted how much our community has been changed by this act that there's no bones about it. Arthur Wicks is the reason why the Thruway is on this side. And I defy you to find another county like Ulster County that has 3 exits in that county. You're not gonna. There's some down in the city, but you're not gonna find any around there.
And
so
restaurants.
the restaurants.
Tax.
Yep.
Taxes.
Yeah, it really changed the face of Ulster County. forever. So we do owe Arthur Wicks a debt of gratitude. And again, thank you very much, Hugh, for the presentation. It really was interesting. Hugh did come up and bring up Arthur Wicks as a subject for the series. And I did say, I'd heard of Arthur Wicks, but I didn't really know anything about him. And that's what this series is about bringing to light some of the people in our local history that have had such a huge impact. And Arthur Wicks really is one of them. So again, Hugh, thank you very much. And again, I used to recite the names of the people. I can't recite everybody's name. We can't thank everybody who makes this possible. And we try, but some of the people are listed here, and we do want to thank them. And Tom Kernan and everybody at the Senate House, again, they're another MVP of this. We wouldn't be here without them. And again, as I always say, they aren't open right now. They open this up for us every month. They set everything up, so we do thank them. We thank everybody who makes this possible, and including, as always, JK Wine and Liquor. They're our official alcohol sponsor, so we always thank them. I do want to tell people about our upcoming series. Next month, we are going to have Old Stone Houses, Our History in Stone by Mark Yallum. He has a Facebook page that many of you might be on, where he features different stone houses in our community. And it's incredibly interesting, but he's going to come here and talk about that. And on May 15th, we're going to jump right into bootlegging, Kingston's Prohibition Past by Eleanor Charwat. And she may, we'll ask her, but Prohibition was an interesting time here, and she's going to tell us all about it. And according to some, Dutch Schultz has a fortune hidden somewhere. Some believe it's in Rosendale, so if anyone finds it by May 15th, please bring it in, and we'll show it. And I do want to end with, and I'll send an email out to everybody in the email blast. Professor Ray Raymond spoke a few months ago about John Jay, did a wonderful job. He's in the process of writing a book, but he also runs a lecture series at SUNY Ulster, the Institute for Constitutional Studies. So next Tuesday, there is going to be a lecture there, and if anyone's around, you should attend, because we appreciate what he did for us, and he does run a wonderful series there. So again, Hugh, thank you so much for the presentation. We thank all of you for being here, and we hope to see you next month. And have a good weekend.